The house felt different at 3 in the morning. Not haunted different. Just hollow, like someone had sucked all the warmth out of the walls and left behind this cold shell where my marriage used to live. I stood in the kitchen of our supposedly perfect colonial, listening to my wife Nadine giggle behind her locked office door upstairs, and wondered when exactly I'd become the fool in this particular comedy. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Trevor McKinnon, successful restaurateur, pillar of the community, complete and utter idiot. That's what the business cards should have read. I'd been running on maybe 3 hours of sleep a night for the past 2 weeks, ever since I'd noticed Nadine's jewelry drawer looking like a hurricane had hit it. Not robbed, just constantly rummaged through, like she couldn't decide which earrings went best with adultery. Her perfume collection had taken a similar hit. The expensive stuff, the bottles I'd bought her for anniversaries and birthdays, were disappearing faster than craft beer at a college party. Tonight's revelation came courtesy of our shared iPad, carelessly left on the kitchen counter. A text notification had lit up the screen just as I was grabbing a glass of water. Can't wait to christen the new property again. Sean Dorsey, my former friend, current snake, and apparently my wife's afternoon entertainment. The giggling upstairs got louder. I could hear her voice now, breathy and excited in a way she hadn't sounded with me in about 5 years. No, he's downstairs. He never comes up here anymore. Well, that stung, but it also gave me an idea. I crept upstairs, avoiding the third step that creaked like a dying crow, and pressed my ear to her office door. The conversation was winding down, but I caught the tail end. Same time Thursday? The Riverside property should be empty all afternoon. Riverside property. That was the half-burned Victorian that Sean's construction company was supposed to be renovating. Apparently, they were renovating more than just the plumbing. Nadine's voice dropped to a whisper. I love you too. This is going to work out perfectly. Trevor won't know what hit him. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. 22 years of marriage, and this was how it ended? With my wife planning my downfall while I stood outside her door like some pathetic private investigator. The hell with that. I made my way back downstairs and did something I hadn't done in months. I poured myself a real drink. Not beer, not wine, but the good whiskey we kept for special occasions. Apparently, discovering your wife's betrayal qualified as special. My restaurant, McKinnon's, had been the talk of this little New England town for 15 years. I'd built it from nothing, turned a failing diner into the place where everyone came for anniversaries, business deals, and first dates. I knew every secret in this town, heard every piece of gossip that floated through my dining room. Politicians, business owners, even the police chief, they all ate at my tables and talked freely around my staff. And now I was going to use every connection, every favor, and every dirty little secret I'd accumulated to make sure Nadine and Sean got exactly what they deserved. But first, I needed proof. Real proof, not just overheard conversations and suspicious behavior. I opened my laptop and started researching. Sean's construction company, Dorsey Development, had been winning a lot of bids lately. Coincidentally, a lot of those properties had been listed by Nadine's real estate agency. Funny how that worked out. By sunrise, I had a plan. It wasn't pretty, and it definitely wasn't nice, but it was thorough. In this business, you learn that revenge, like a good sauce, needs time to develop its full flavor. Nadine came down at 7, already dressed for work in one of her power suits. She looked surprised to see me at the kitchen table. "You're up early," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Couldn't sleep. You know how it is." I gestured at my laptop. "Just going over some restaurant business. Speaking of which, how's the real estate market?" She stiffened slightly. "Fine. Busy. Lots of properties moving." "That's great. Sean's company must be doing well too with all the renovation work." The coffee mug in her hand trembled almost imperceptibly. I wouldn't know. We don't really work together that much. Liar. But I just smiled and nodded. Of course not. Well, I should get to the restaurant. Marty's expecting me early today. Marty Kowalski was my restaurant manager, a former Army sergeant who'd been with me for 8 years. If I was going to war, there was nobody I'd rather have watching my back. I kissed Nadine's cheek. She flinched and headed out into what was shaping up to be a very interesting day. McKinnon's occupied a prime corner spot on Main Street with big windows that let me watch the comings and goings of our little town. I'd bought the building 10 years ago, when the previous owner couldn't make his mortgage payments. Now it was worth 3 times what I'd paid, and it was all mine, unlike some other things in my life. Marty was already in the kitchen when I arrived, prepping vegetables with the precision of a surgeon. He looked up when I walked in, took one look at my face, and set down his knife. What happened? I'd always appreciated Marty's directness. No small talk, no dancing around issues, just straight to the point. My wife is sleeping with Sean Dorsey. He nodded like I'd just told him we were out of salmon. You want me to break his legs? Not yet. Maybe later. Right now, I need information. Marty had a network of contacts throughout the town that would make the CIA jealous. Construction workers, delivery drivers, cleaning ladies, people who saw everything and were usually invisible to the folks they were watching. What kind of information? Everything. Where they meet, when they meet, who knows about it. I also want to know about Sean's business dealings, especially anything involving Nadine's real estate company. How deep do you want me to dig? I thought about that giggling laugh I'd heard last night, about 22 years of marriage being flushed away for some midlife crisis excitement. All the way to bedrock. The lunch rush was lighter than usual, which gave me time to think. I watched the familiar faces of my customers, the mayor having his usual chicken sandwich, the bank president entertaining clients at table 6, the police chief grabbing a quick burger at the counter. These people trusted me, confided in me. I was about to find out just how much that trust was worth. Around 2 o'clock, Lois Patterson walked in, Nadine's older sister, and about as different from my wife as chalk from cheese. Where Nadine was all polish and ambition, Lois was practical and blunt. They'd had a falling out 3 years ago over some family money and barely spoke anymore. She slid onto a bar stool and ordered coffee. You look like hell, Trevor. Thanks. You always know just what to say to make a man feel better. She studied my face with the intensity of a forensic pathologist. It's Nadine, isn't it? What's she done now? I almost choked on my coffee. What makes you think she's done anything? Because I know my sister. She's got that look again, the same one she had in high school when she was sneaking around with Billy Hendricks behind her boyfriend's back, all secretive and pleased with herself. This was interesting. You've seen her recently? Last week at the grocery store, she was buying expensive wine and acting all mysterious about it. Said it was for a special client dinner, but Nadine's never entertained a client in her life. She always takes them to restaurants. Lois paused meaningfully. Your restaurant, usually. Anything else? Lois leaned closer. She's been asking questions about you, about the restaurant's finances, about what would happen if you two split up. She called it hypothetical planning for a friend, but Nadine doesn't have friends. She has contacts. The pieces were starting to fit together. Nadine wasn't just having an affair. She was planning her exit strategy. Probably figured she could take half of everything I'd built and run off with Sean to start fresh somewhere else. The bell over the door chimed, and Sean Dorsey himself walked in. Speak of the devil. He was a big man, all broad shoulders and expensive clothes, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to face real consequences for his actions. He'd been coming to my restaurant for years, back when we were actually friends, before I knew he was the kind of man who'd steal another man's wife. He spotted me behind the bar and walked over with that easy smile that had probably charmed half the women in town. Trevor, how's business? Can't complain. How's the construction trade? Booming. Can't build houses fast enough around here. Lots of people want to renovate old properties, fix them up. His smile widened. Your wife's been a real help with that. She knows all the best properties. I bet she does. That's great. Nadine's always been good at finding hidden value in things. She sure is. In fact, we're working on a project together right now. That old Victorian over on Riverside Street. Going to be beautiful when we're done with it. The same property Nadine had mentioned on the phone last night. Sean was either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant, probably both. Sounds like a big job. You spending a lot of time over there? Oh yeah, practically every day. Sometimes evenings too, when the light's right for detail work. He winked. You know how it is with these old places. You've got to be gentle with them, take your time, really get to know every inch. I wanted to punch him in his smug face, but that would have been too easy. Instead, I smiled back and nodded. I'm sure you do excellent work. Very thorough. After he left, I called Marty over. I need you to take a drive past the Riverside property this afternoon. See if you can get some pictures of Sean's construction work. Marty grinned. It wasn't a pleasant expression. My pleasure. By closing time, I had a much clearer picture of what I was dealing with. Marty's reconnaissance had confirmed that Sean's truck was parked behind the Victorian every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, right around the time Nadine claimed to be showing properties to out-of-town clients. More interesting was what Marty had learned from his network. Sean's company had been struggling financially until about 6 months ago, when they suddenly started winning bid after bid for renovation projects. All of those properties had been listed by Nadine's agency, and all of them had sold for significantly more than their original asking price. It looked like my wife and her boyfriend had been running their own little insider trading scheme, using Nadine's access to property information to help Sean's company corner the market on profitable renovations. That was fraud. Real, prosecutable, go-to-prison fraud. But I wasn't going to call the police. Not yet, anyway. Prison would be too easy for them, too clean. I wanted them to suffer the way I was suffering, publicly, humiliatingly, with their reputations and their futures in ruins. I wanted them destroyed. Thursday afternoon found me parked across the street from the Riverside property, camera in hand, and revenge on my mind. Marty was positioned at the back of the building, ready to document whatever construction work Sean and Nadine were planning to do. They arrived separately, of course. Nadine first in her silver BMW, looking around nervously before hurrying inside through the back door. Sean followed 10 minutes later, carrying what looked like a bottle of wine and a picnic basket. Some construction work. I'd done my homework on this property. The Victorian had been damaged in a kitchen fire 6 months ago, and the insurance settlement was still tied up in court. Technically, the building was condemned and off-limits to everyone except authorized contractors and city inspectors. Sean's company had the renovation contract, but they weren't supposed to start work until the insurance issues were resolved. So whatever they were doing in there was definitely not legal and probably not safe. Perfect. I waited 45 minutes, long enough for them to get comfortable, then made my move. The front door was unlocked, careless of them, really. I could hear voices from upstairs, along with some other sounds I didn't particularly want to identify. The stairs creaked under my weight, but they were too distracted to notice. I found them in what used to be the master bedroom, on a mattress that definitely hadn't been there when I'd toured the property last month. Nadine's real estate blazer was draped over a sawdust-covered chair, and Sean's work boots were kicked carelessly into a corner. They were so absorbed in each other that I managed to get nearly a full minute of video before Sean noticed me. His face went through several interesting color changes before settling on a sickly gray. "Trevor, we weren't inspecting the structural integrity of the floor joists?" I suggested helpfully. "Very thorough work, Sean. I can see why you win so many contracts." Nadine had gone completely still, like a deer caught in headlights. She was calculating. I could see it in her eyes, trying to figure out how much damage control would be needed. "Trevor, we need to talk about this, like adults," she said finally, reaching for her clothes. "Oh, we will. But first, I think we should discuss the legal implications of what you're doing here. This property is condemned, Sean. You're not supposed to be here without city permits and safety inspections. And Nadine, I'm pretty sure using condemned properties for personal recreation violates about 6 different real estate regulations." Sean found his voice. "You can't prove anything." I held up my phone, still recording. "Actually, I can prove quite a lot, but don't worry, I'm not going to the police yet." That got their attention. "What do you want?" Nadine asked. "Right now? I want you both to get dressed and get out. We'll continue this conversation later, when you've had time to think about your options." They scrambled into their clothes, with all the dignity of teenagers caught by their parents. Sean tried to bluster his way past me, but I stepped aside and let him go. No point in escalating to violence when I had better weapons available. Nadine paused at the door. "Trevor, please. We can work this out." "I'm sure we can, but it's going to be on my terms now." After they left, I took a thorough tour of the property. The renovation work Sean's company was supposedly doing was minimal at best. A few cosmetic repairs, some basic cleaning. Certainly not enough to justify the inflated budget they'd submitted to the insurance company. I found receipts in Sean's jacket pocket. He'd been in such a hurry to leave that he'd forgotten it. Receipts for materials that had never been delivered, labor charges for work that had never been done. It was a textbook case of insurance fraud, with my wife's real estate agency providing the inside information needed to make it work. But insurance fraud was a federal crime, and federal prosecutors didn't care about personal vendettas. They'd lock up Sean and Nadine for a few years, then release them to start fresh somewhere else with new identities and clean records. I wanted something more permanent. Back at the restaurant, I found Marty waiting with a pot of coffee and a grim expression. "Get what you needed?" "More than I expected. How's your photography?" He showed me the pictures he'd taken through the back windows. Nothing pornographic, but definitely incriminating. Sean and Nadine embracing, sharing wine, clearly comfortable in surroundings that were supposed to be off-limits. "What's the next move?" Marty asked. "We're going to give them exactly what they want. A chance to explain themselves. Tomorrow night, after closing. I think it's time for a staff meeting." Marty's grin was predatory. "Should I invite the whole crew?" "Everyone who's been here more than 2 years. They deserve to know what's been going on." The next evening, I gathered my core staff in the restaurant's private dining room. 8 people total, all of them loyal employees who'd helped build McKinnon's into what it was today. Marty had briefed them on the basics, but they were still shocked when I played the audio recording I'd made at the Victorian. Nadine's voice filled the room. "This is going to work out perfectly. Trevor won't know what hit him." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Sarah, my head waitress, spoke up. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give them a chance to do the right thing, and if they don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of people they really are." "Count us in," said Miguel, my sous chef. "Mrs. McKinnon always acted like she was better than us, but you've always treated us fair." The others nodded agreement. In a small town like ours, loyalty was everything. Nadine and Sean had forgotten that, but they were about to get a very painful reminder. The confrontation came sooner than I'd expected. Nadine stormed into the restaurant the next evening, just as we were closing. She'd clearly been drinking, not drunk, but definitely fortified for battle. "We need to talk," she announced, loud enough for the remaining customers to hear. "Of course. Why don't we use the private dining room?" "No, right here is fine." Bad choice, but her call. I gestured for Marty to stay close and let her have the floor. "I know what you think you saw yesterday, but you're wrong. Sean and I are working together on a legitimate business deal, that's all." "Really? What kind of business deal requires you to lie naked on a mattress?" Her face flushed red. You have no right to spy on me. I have every right to document criminal activity on a property I'm considering purchasing. That stopped her cold. What? The Riverside Victorian. I've been thinking about buying it for a second restaurant location. Imagine my surprise when I discovered it was already being used for recreational purposes. Several of my remaining customers were openly staring now. Nadine noticed and lowered her voice. Trevor, please, can we discuss this privately? I think we're past privacy, don't you? You've been planning my downfall for months. The least you can do is have the courage to face the consequences publicly. I pulled out my phone and played a different recording. This one from her office, the night I'd overheard her phone conversation with Sean. Her voice, clear and unmistakable. Trevor won't know what hit him. The color drained from her face. You recorded me in my own home? I recorded you plotting against me in the home we shared. There's a difference. She looked around the restaurant, suddenly aware of all the eyes watching her. This isn't over. Actually, it is. You have until Monday to move out of the house. After that, I'm changing the locks. You can't do that. It's my house, too. Check the deed. It's in my name only. Always has been. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. The remaining customers burst into excited conversation the moment the door closed behind her. By morning, half the town would know that Nadine McKinnon had been caught cheating on her husband. By evening, they'd know all the sordid details. But I wasn't done yet. Sean called me at home that weekend, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. You need to stop this, Trevor, right now. Stop what? Protecting my business interests? You know damn well what I'm talking about. The rumors, the gossip. You're destroying both our reputations. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just letting people know the truth about what you've been doing. It's not what you think. Nadine and I are committing insurance fraud. I have the receipts, Sean. The ones you left in your jacket at the Victorian. Very sloppy work for someone who's supposed to be a professional contractor. The silence stretched out for nearly a minute. When Sean spoke again, his voice was different. Harder, more desperate. What do you want? I want my wife back the way she was before you poisoned her against me. But since that's impossible, I'll settle for making sure you both get exactly what you deserve. And what's that? Public humiliation, financial ruin, the complete destruction of everything you've built, the same way you destroyed my marriage. You're insane. Maybe. But I'm also very thorough, and I have a lot of friends in this town. Friends who don't like people who cheat and steal and lie. I hung up before he could respond. Monday morning brought the first real test of my plan. Nadine's belongings were packed and waiting on the front porch when she arrived with a moving truck. She'd brought Sean and 2 of his workers to help with the heavy lifting. I watched from the kitchen window as they loaded her furniture and boxes. 22 years of marriage, reduced to a truck full of stuff. It should have made me sad. But mostly, I just felt empty. Nadine came to the door when they were finished. I need to get some things from my office. I'm afraid that's not possible. I've had the locks changed. Those are my files, Trevor. My client information. Actually, they're not. According to the partnership agreement you signed when you started using the house as your office, any business conducted on my property becomes joint property in case of divorce proceedings. She stared at me. We're not getting divorced. We will be. The papers are being filed this afternoon. For the first time since this whole thing started, Nadine looked genuinely frightened. Trevor, please, we can work this out. No, we can't. You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences. Sean appeared behind her. This is harassment, Trevor. I'll have you arrested. For what? Protecting my own property? Feel free to call the police. I'm sure they'd be very interested in those insurance receipts I found. Sean's face went pale. He grabbed Nadine's arm and pulled her toward the truck. Come on, we're done here. I watched them drive away, then went inside to call my lawyer. It was time for the next phase of my plan. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I'd expected. Nadine had hired a lawyer, but her legal position was weak. The house, the restaurant, even the car she'd been driving, everything was in my name. Her affair with Sean had been thoroughly documented, and the insurance fraud evidence made it impossible for her to claim any moral high ground. More importantly, the town had turned against both of them. Sean's construction company was hemorrhaging clients as word spread about his illegal activities at the Victorian property. Nadine's real estate career was effectively over. Nobody wanted to work with an agent who couldn't be trusted. But I still wasn't satisfied. They'd hurt me, and I wanted them to understand exactly what that felt like. The opportunity came when Sean's fiancée, yes, he'd been engaged this whole time, found out about the affair. Jennifer Walsh was the daughter of the town's wealthiest family, and she did not take betrayal lightly. She confronted Sean at his office, in front of his employees and several clients, and the screaming match that followed made the local paper. That's when I made my move. I called Jennifer and offered to buy her lunch. She was hurt, angry, and looking for revenge of her own. Perfect. "I have some information you might find useful," I told her over coffee at a restaurant across town from mine. About Sean's business practices. I showed her the insurance receipts, the falsified work orders, the evidence of bid rigging that Marty had uncovered. Jennifer's family had connections throughout the state government, including the insurance commissioner's office. "What do you want me to do with this?" she asked. "Whatever you think is appropriate. I just thought you should know what kind of man you were planning to marry." She studied the documents for a long time. "This is enough to put him in prison." "Probably, but that's not my decision to make." Jennifer made her decision the next day. She turned over all the evidence to the state insurance fraud division, along with a detailed statement about Sean's illegal activities. The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. Sean was arrested on a Tuesday morning, right in front of his office building. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page, complete with photos of him being led away in handcuffs. Nadine wasn't charged. She'd been careful to keep her involvement unofficial, but her reputation was destroyed. The real estate agency fired her the day after Sean's arrest, and no other agency in town would hire her. Within a month, both of them had left town. Sean was facing federal fraud charges and couldn't afford bail. Nadine had no job, no money, and no prospects. I heard through the gossip network that she'd moved in with her sister in another state, working as a clerk in a grocery store. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday. I signed the papers in my lawyer's office, then went back to the restaurant to work the dinner shift. It felt good to be busy, to focus on something productive instead of dwelling on revenge. But I had one last surprise planned. I'd used Sean's fraud settlement money, the insurance company had recovered most of it, to buy the Riverside Victorian property. After a proper renovation, it reopened as McKinnon's second location, specializing in private events and catering. The grand opening was scheduled for a Friday night. I invited everyone in town, including the mayor, the police chief, and all the local business owners who'd been affected by Sean and Nadine's schemes. The signature cocktail for the evening was called Second Thoughts, a bittersweet mix that seemed appropriate for the occasion. I was greeting guests at the front door when I saw a familiar car pull up outside. Nadine's silver BMW, looking dusty and dented. She got out slowly, wearing a cheap dress and old shoes, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past 6 months. She walked up to the door, but I stepped outside before she could enter. "Hello, Trevor." "Nadine, you look different." She laughed bitterly. "That's what happens when you lose everything. You look different." "Is there something you wanted?" "I wanted to see what you'd done with the place where—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Where you destroyed our marriage. It's a restaurant now, a successful one, from the looks of tonight's crowd. I made a mistake, Trevor. A terrible mistake. I know that now. Yes, you did. Several of them, actually. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. She was broken, desperate, probably hoping I'd take her back and restore her to the comfortable life she'd thrown away. I already have forgiven you, Nadine. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. She nodded slowly, tears starting to form in her eyes. What about Sean? What about him? He's in federal prison, last I heard. Probably will be for the next 5 to 10 years. He said he loved me. Maybe he did. But love isn't enough when it's built on lies and betrayal. She stood there for another moment, then turned and walked back to her car. I watched her drive away and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Inside the restaurant, the party was in full swing. My friends and neighbors were celebrating not just the new business, but the end of a chapter that had nearly destroyed me. They'd stood by me through the worst period of my life, and now they were here to share in my recovery. Marty appeared at my elbow with a glass of champagne. How does it feel? Like justice, I said, raising my glass to toast the room full of people who'd helped me rebuild my life. Like finally getting the last word. The evening wound down around midnight. After the last guest had left and the staff had finished cleaning up, I stood alone in the dining room of my new restaurant, looking around at what I'd built from the ashes of my old life. Nadine and Sean had tried to destroy me, but they'd underestimated something important. In a small town, reputation is everything, and I'd spent 15 years building mine while they'd spent 6 months destroying theirs. They'd gotten exactly what they deserved, and I'd gotten something better than revenge. I'd gotten my life back. I turned off the lights and locked the door, then walked out into the cool night air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new reasons to get up in the morning. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was going home to a house that was truly mine, to sleep in a bed that held no lies or betrayals. It was enough.